In a 10 Age of Apocalypse Nightcrawler, Kurt Darkholme, a native of the divergent timeline known as the Age of Apocalypse, was a member of the mutant resistance known as the X-Men. The timeline of the Age of Apocalypse diverged widely from the 616 timeline after the premature death of Charles Xavier in his early adulthood. As a result, the ancient mutant apocalypse ascended early and embarked on a reign of terror across the globe because, of course. Kurt, donning the codename Nightcrawler, stood with his fellow mutant heroes, the X-Men, in defiance of the genocidal anti-human regime of Apocalypse. Just like his 616 version, Nightcrawler could teleport, though it was through another dimension, and had a radius of 2 miles at a time, carrying 2 to 3 people along with himself. This version also favored teleporting sections of people away, in essence amputating them instantly, which is brutal. Not to mention the 2 freaking swords that he carries around because he can. Teleporting their heads somewhere else wasn't enough. This version wanted to be able to hack his opponent's limb from limb. And at 9, X-Men 2099. X-Men 2099 is a comic book series published by Marvel from 1993 to 1996 that chronicled the adventures of an X-Men team in the year 2099. It extends the vast Marvel 2099, universe, which features future versions of other popular Marvel characters such as Spider-Man and Hulk, and this team featured an ever-changing roster. However, the main core group of characters featured people like Desert Ghost, Skullfire, Bloodhawk, Mainstreak, Metalhead, Cerebra, Crystalline, Junkpile, La Lunatica, Serpentina, and Sham. The group is certainly more powerful given that they're in the 2099 universe, which saw future versions of heroes and villains gain all kinds of powerful upgrades, so needless to say, this group is going to be something to behold, with members like Metalhead being able to take on the properties of any metal that they touch, which also would be applied to adamantium or vibranium, or Junkpile, who can telekinetically draw metallic objects to himself and then use them to rebuild his body or add to his physical mass, making him basically resistant to harm. So yeah, certainly an interesting X-Men version. And at 8, Ultimate Cyclops. On Earth 1610, Scott's parents died in a plane crash when he was young, and he and his older brother Alex were separated, with Scott ending up in foster care. One day at school, he was beaten and humiliated by a bully for his inability to fight back and wet himself in front of his peers. Great. He returned home where his powers activated and accidentally killed his foster parents, Noah and Janelle. Great. At some point later in his life though, Scott was dating a young woman named Lorna Dane, until she dumped him for his brother Alex. That stings, man, especially since the relationship between the 2 brothers became even worse after that, and Scott became estranged to Alex, no longer speaking to him after he joined the X-Men sometime later. Although that's understandable. In the Ultimate Universe, Scott is able to absorb ambient energy from his environment, such as sunlight and electricity, and store it within his cells, metabolizing the energy in order to open a dimensional aperture through his eyes to unleash an exotic form of energy as heatless blasts of concussive force. He was also able to use the ambient collected energy to fly, deactivate, and channel his energy blast through any part of his body besides his eyes, which is freaking nuts and sounds pretty dope, minus the whole being able to not control it thing.
Number 7, Deadpool. Wade Wilson. Who doesn't love that guy? He's just awesome. Just don't get on his bad side and you'll be okay. You know what? Never mind. I think it's impossible to stay off his bad side because he can just hate you in a split second for like no reason at all. He's unpredictable. To go along with that, he's a highly skilled mercenary and has one of the best healing factors in the Marvel Universe, which makes him almost impossible to kill. But he has fought Wolverine multiple times. One of the first times was in Wolverine issue 88. And in that fight, Deadpool won by stabbing his swords right into Logan's lungs. Ah, man. That hurts even to say that. Wolverine got his revenge though in Cable and Deadpool issue number 44. I mean, the list goes on and on. But let's not forget what their most famous fight of all is, right? Can you guess it? Okay, I'll just tell you. It's their fight from X-Men Origins Wolverine. One of the greatest fights in cinematic history. Okay, you know what? I'm not even gonna joke about that. It's just too hard. Okay, deep breath. Okay. Alright, I'm good. Alright. Let's just continue. Let's just keep moving on. Number 6, Apocalypse. Apocalypse is a very, very dangerous dude. Not only is he one of the X-Men's greatest villains, but he's also believed to be one of the very first mutants, like ever. That's just creepy and cool. He was born in Egypt around 3000 BC. Now, Apocalypse has what he believes to be a very simple philosophy, that only the strong should be able to survive. And that's it. It doesn't just apply to mutants either. It could be anyone. If you're weak, just get out of town because Apocalypse has no plans for you. He even turned Wolverine into one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, the horsemen of death. Aside from that, the dude is basically immortal. He has super strength, teleportation, telekinesis, telepathy, self-molecular manipulation. So you can say he's pretty dangerous. There's a reason the X-Men fear him so much. Number 5, Legion. Legion, also known as David Haller, is a really interesting one. For the longest time, he was really unknown to anyone that wasn't a hardcore X-Men fan. But after getting his own critically acclaimed show on FX, he became fairly popular. David is the son of Charles Xavier. He has a form of dissociative identity disorder, which leads into his name, Legion, for his legion of personalities. The interesting thing about him is that his personalities have different mutant abilities. So, for example, one could have telekinesis, another telepathy, another super strength. It's kind of insane. It makes him really powerful, but also incredibly dangerous. You would have no idea what kind of fight you'd be getting yourself into. I mean, one moment he could be on your good side, but then a split second, he's against you with a completely new ability. It's that level of unpredictability that is truly terrifying. Now, Legion also leads us into the next person on our list pretty perfectly. Number 4, Charles Xavier. Yeah, his dad, the founder of the X-Men, good old Professor X. Now, Charles and Logan are almost always on the same side, so it's very unlikely that, they would get into a fight. But if they did, it would be really interesting. Charles is one of the most powerful telepaths in the Marvel Universe. Not only that, he's also one of the smartest people in the Marvel Universe. Put those two things together and you have a very dangerous combo. He can create, telepathic illusions, create a mental link which becomes even more powerful when he's plugged into Cerebro. He can also use his abilities to control the minds of other people. Charles has even taken over someone else's mind completely, where he has been able to control their body. It's kind of insane. And it just goes to show why you really don't want to get on his bad side. But luckily, he usually uses his powers for good and helps out so many mutants in the process. Although, he has made some very questionable decisions along the way. But who hasn't, right? Number 3, Scarlet Witch. Even though it has changed, I'm still considering Scarlet Witch to be a mutant. I'm sorry, I have to. It will be forever ingrained in my brain that she's a mutant. And I don't think anything will ever change that. But, back to the main point, she's super dangerous. Almost wiped out every mutant in existence with a single word, dangerous. Yeah, she's literally responsible for millions of mutants losing their powers during the House of M storyline. Not only that, but she is also one of the strongest magic users in the universe. She can use chaos magic to warp reality and is a very, very skilled fighter. Throw in that she's also the daughter of Magneto, and that's a pretty dangerous individual. Even look at her in her live action appearances. She was able to take on Thanos in Endgame to the point where she almost probably would have killed him if it wasn't for, his ship starting to fire. And Kevin Feige has said that Wanda is one of the most powerful characters in the MCU. So that makes 2 different universes where she is dangerous and powerful. That definitely tells you something. Number 2, Jean Grey. Everyone knows how powerful Jean Grey is, whether it's on her own or when she was, Dark Phoenix. There's a reason why even Charles Xavier has feared her. Her powers are off the charts. Over the years, she's not only taken on some of the biggest, scariest villains in the Marvel Universe, but also its heroes. Most notably, during the Dark Phoenix storyline, which is one of the most famous comic stories of all time. Fans just can't get enough of it. Even without the Phoenix Force, Jean has telepathy, telekinesis, memory alteration, so basically she can erase, restore, or even implant memories into someone. She could literally erase someone's memories and make them a completely different person if she just wanted to. Of course, she wouldn't, unless it was like a life or death situation, but that option is always on the table. Number 1, Magneto. I've mentioned before how scary Magneto can be. It's not just because of his powers, it's his ability to manipulate people. He's crazy good at it. And if you need proof, just look at his army of followers. People trust him and will give their lives for him. And it's usually not even out of fear. It sometimes can be, but it's usually because they want to fight for him. His powers also really help. He has the ability to control all forms of magnetism, which he mostly uses to manipulate all forms of metal, including adamantium. He also has trained himself to fight off telepaths, so they can't control or use him. With all that, it's not hard to see why he's the X-Men's greatest foe, and one of the most dangerous people in the Marvel universe.
Number 10, Kid Cable. He might not be as powerful as the old man or as wise, or for that matter as powerful as some of the other youngsters on this list, but Kid Cable has a ton of potential. And to be fair, he is pretty powerful when it comes to outwitting people and working his way out of some pretty sticky situations. He also has the Summer family waiting in the wings to back him up when he needs. While their power is obviously not his own, having both his mom, Marvel Girl, and dad, Cyclops, as frequent allies, as well as his sister Rachel, is something that should be noted. Because there are many times these days in the Dawn of X line where we see this family supporting one another and teaming up. Cable has his powerful telepathic and telekinetic powers, as well as his love of big guns and big swords to help him qualify as one of the most powerful and sometimes resourceful teen mutants around. Number 9, Jubilee. Jubilee is one of those mutants who also has the potential to be even more powerful the older she gets. As a teenager, her powers were more unpredictable, but she still had that potential to create mass destruction using them. A lot of people think of Jubilee's powers as just being a fun display of fireworks, but she can actually create explosions on a subatomic level, meaning that she has the potential to go nuclear under the right conditions or with the correct amount of training. Her emotional connection with Wolverine gave Jubilee enough power to decimate part of Mandarin's castle when Logan was in danger. While Jubilee might not have seemed like the most powerful teen mutant, she definitely was capable of more than most give her credit for. So now she's pretty much all grown up though, with her son, who is currently a dragon, Shogo, to look after. But she was a teen once, and when she was a teen, she was pretty powerful. She was pretty cool. I like Jubilee, she's one of my favorites. Before we move on to our next point, just a reminder to give that like button a little click. Just give it a little click. It really helps us out on the channel and lets us know that you are loving these mutant lists. And who doesn't love mutant lists? I love mutant lists personally. Let me do more of them, please. Click the like. Number 8, Prodigy. Prodigy is one of the smartest mutants around, and even when he was depowered, he was still pretty powerful. David Alain was always known for his intelligence, but when his mutant powers activated, he became even more brilliant. His powers allow him to telepathically absorb the knowledge and skill set of those around him. Initially, he worked towards not using his powers and keeping them a secret, trying to resist them because he felt that any knowledge gained this way while he was a student was sort of cheating, which to be fair, I guess it kinda is. Eventually, he ended up joining the New Mutants and enrolling at the Xavier Institute. Even when he lost his powers, he was still considered to be one of the brightest now depowered mutants around, as he still had the knowledge and skills that he had already absorbed and learned telepathically. He still held on to that. But now he's back to being a mutant because Krakoa.
And at 7, Ultimate Wolverine. Wolverine suffered from amnesia. As a result, what little was known about his early life was both suspect and unverifiable. It is believed that at one point Wolverine had a wife and child, but they were supposedly murdered by Sabretooth. As both Wolverine and Sabretooth's memories had been tampered with in the past, this claim was highly suspect. However, Wolverine did own a wedding ring that served as his only link to the past, so maybe there's something there. This version of Wolverine also has a healing factor, disease resistance, which is useful nowadays, toxin resistance, damn I wish I had that now, cause you know, toxicity, extended longevity, superhuman senses, superhuman strength, superhuman stamina, which must be why the ladies love him, superhuman agility, superhuman reflexes, and the classic adamantium lace skeletal structure and retractable claws. Wolverine is also an experienced hand-to-hand combatant and is an expert assassin and can at least lift 800 pounds. Like bro, can you even lift bro? Spider-Man can lift twice that. That's not even with the symbiote suit, which I guess technically doesn't count because it's a separate thing, but still, come on Wolverine, step up your game. And at 6, Goddess of Thunder. What if Storm was the God of Thunder? That's in essence what the story of What If Volume 2 number 12 from 1990 asks. Well, in reality it's what if the X-Men stayed on Asgard, but still. After visiting Asgard, several members of the X-Men and New Mutants decided to stay this time, while those returning to Earth drove the X-Men into a new era. Many of those staying though found new loves. Wolfsbane found love in the Himhrari, Prince of the Asgardian Wolves, while Rogue found love in Fandral the Dashing. Of the Warriors of 3, Cypher became a scholar, translating and reading scripts long dead in Asgard, while Cannonball married Kindra, the daughter of the Dwarf King. Nightcrawler and Sunspot became warriors, while Mirage became one of the Valkyrie. Magic became the Sorceress Supreme of Asgard and assumed the role once held by the Enchantress, and Storm became the new Goddess of Thunder, since Thor was trapped in the form of a Midgard frog. Yep, that's right, Throg! Carnilla and Hela conspired to steal Storm's soul with the Sword of Surtur, but were defeated defeated. The sword was also then destroyed during the battle, and Loki was unable to draw his mystic energy from it, releasing Thor. But with Odin dead, Thor renounced his claim to the throne and returned to Earth, so Storm became the Queen of Asgard. Pretty dope. Halfway through, in at number 5, Bloodstorm. A street thief living in the streets of Egypt, the mutant Ororo Munro sealed her fate when she attempted to pickpocket a man who turned out to be Dracula. She eventually managed to free herself from the vampire's control and found a new purpose among the X-Men. Unfortunately, her thirst for blood overpowered her, which resulted in her killing at least both Beast and Professor X. Scott and Ororo developed romantic feelings for each other, but Scott was hesitant to act on them since he expected to return to his proper time along with the rest of the young X-Men. But also, you know, she's a vampire. This ain't Twilight. During a date though, Storm started to convince Scott to pursue his feelings, but the couple was attacked by Ahab and his hounds. During the ensuing fight, Bloodstorm was impaled by Ahab with his silver-coated spear. Fueled by rage, Scott got the upper hand, forcing Ahab to retreat, but Scott ended up having to carry Bloodstorm's corpse, and his arms dissolved into dust. Yeah. In addition to the powers of Storm from Earth 616, Bloodstorm can also shapeshift into a mist or a flock of bats, and can hypnotize people into doing her bidding with only a gaze, cause, you know, female vampires. She also feeds on a consenting Scott in an attempt to satiate her hunger and prevent her from going dark again. Only feed on those who consent. And at 4, New Exiles Rogue. Rogue's powers can be difficult to explain. Actually, not really. Simply put, Rogue's powers allow her to absorb powers from other people, even people who aren't super. She absorbs like memories and stuff. But she isn't really able to control it. She has slight control over her powers, but not enough to make her scary OP. However, the same cannot be said for the Rogue introduced in New Exiles, since this version of Rogue has complete control over her powers, technically speaking, since she can only absorb powers through skin-to-skin contact on her hands rather than her whole body, so if she just wears gloves, she's fine. She can also recall powers from people that she has already touched, which sounds weird now that I'm thinking about it, but still, this is freaking nuts. Imagine just like going around to like a mutant prison or whatever in the raft and just like high-fiving every villain there. You'd gain their abilities, right? And then just boom, you're basically a god. Even if you did that with the X-Men or the Avengers, but like not the Hulk, because I don't want to be like a giant green behemoth. But like maybe I would just like, I wouldn't have to turn into one. I'd just like have his super strength while he's in Hulk form. And I don't know how that would realistically work, okay? But it still sounds wicked. Getting close to the end, in at number 3, Mutant X Professor X. Charles Xavier of Earth 1298 believed in harmony between man and mutant, formed along with his friend Magus the X-Men, and led the team towards that peaceful goal. However, the day they fought the Shadow King, everything changed. The good in Xavier was corrupted, and he left the team to explore his powers further. When he returned, it was during an attack by the Juggernaut. Xavier fired a blast at Juggernaut, but it missed and killed Magneto's lover instead. Xavier left the X-Men for good after that, and traveled the world seeking out telepaths, who he captured and incarcerated around the globe, because of course he would. Xavier was also able to take over S.H.I.E.L.D. and absorbed a load of telepaths' powers into himself. This, in combination with the corruption from the Shadow King, amplified Professor X's powers to an unknown extent. But I think it's safe to say that that's pretty damn terrifying. Man, imagine Rogue absorbing those powers. Man, she should have been higher on the list. The hell? But ultimately, in at number 2, X-Men The End, Jean Grey. To say that the X-Men stories revolve around Jean Grey would be a slight overstatement, but in essence they always seem to at some point be trying to fight off the Phoenix Force from corrupting Jean or having to deal with her evil version. However, the version of Jean from the X-Men The End is the most powerful version we've seen, having fully embraced the Phoenix Force and merged with her evil doppelganger or clone or whatever the hell it is. The End stories revolve around various characters meeting their end or having some stories come to an end, which we can see when Cassandra Nova attacks the X-Men and the Shi'ar Imperial Guard. She then begins to erase Xavier's mind. Marvel Girl summons her residual Phoenix Force energies and engages Cassandra in psychic battle, but Jean Grey, once again the Phoenix, uses her powers to heal Cable when suddenly she and Cyclops are killed by a psionic blast fired by a mind-controlled Marvel Girl. So, RIP. Cassandra's astral form leaps out of Marvel Girl's mind and merges with the Phoenix Force, and there's a whole lot more to the story though, so if you're interested in it, I highly recommend reading it because that will do it way more justice than I can. Oh, damn. Finally, in number 1, Brother Mutant. Brother Mutant was created in the Exiles universe of Earth 127 and made his first appearance in Exiles number 85 from 2006. Brother Mutant was an amalgamated being created when the Scarlet Warlock tried to imbue Magneto with the adamantium-laced skeleton of Wolverine and failed, causing Wolverine, Magneto, Quicksilver, Mesmero, and Scarlet Warlock to merge into a single being, which is ironic because that ends up in essence giving Magneto an adamantium-laced skeleton, since Brother Mutant was capable of using the combined powers of all 5 characters who inhabited him, which is absolutely nuts considering how a gender-bent Scarlet Witch was combined with Quicksilver, Magneto with Wolverine's healing factor and claws. So yeah, I'm sure you can see why this guy is number 1. Various James Howletts from other realities were dispatched by the Timebreakers to stop Brother Mutant but were unsuccessful, only defeating him when the Exiles and one last group of Wolverines just wrecked him, I guess. Imagine Rogue absorbing these powers. The Rogue should have been number 1. What am I doing?
Number 10. Mystique. Raven Darkholme, also known as the villainous Mystique, can be very dangerous for a variety of reasons. One of the biggest ones being her ability to shapeshift. In an instant, she can become someone else entirely, and never even know it. She can mimic every trait, even someone's voice. It's crazy. On top of that, she's also a highly skilled fighter, who usually uses her skills for some not so nice mutants. Although, she has dabbled on the side of good every now and then. But, like her power, she's constantly changing, and that makes her even more dangerous. Number 9. Storm. Storm shouldn't come as a surprise. She is not only incredibly powerful, but is also a fan favorite. She has the mutant ability of weather manipulation. She can literally create massive blizzards, electrical storms, tornadoes, hurricanes, even tsunamis. Like, if that doesn't scream dangerous, then you need to get your definition of dangerous looked at. Seriously, not only is she dangerous on the power side, but she's also powerful in a lot of other ways. One of those being, she was once one of the leaders of Wakanda after marrying T'Challa, aka Black Panther. So she is someone you don't want to mess with. Unless you're crazy, then, just go right ahead. Number 8. Cable. General audiences recently became a lot more familiar with Cable because of his appearance in Deadpool 2. Cable, also known as Nathan Summers, is the time-traveling son of Scott Summers, Cyclops, and Madeline Pryor, who was later discovered to be a clone of Jean Grey. Man, the X-Men have some crazy love storylines. As I mentioned earlier, Cable is a time traveler, but along with that, his powers include, telepathic illusions, telepathic cloak, mind link, telepathic camouflage, mind control, telekinesis, and he has a cybernetic eye implant, which can fire a very powerful laser. So powerful that it has even destroyed one of the Avengers' jets at one point.
Number 7. X-23, or as we know her now, just Wolverine. As Logan says, you just call yourself Wolverine, there can be 2 of us. Laura Kinney was created and raised to be a fighting machine. It was all her mother could do to sneak in some normalcy to her daughter's routine. Also, the story of how her creator was forced into bearing her and literally become her mother in that way is pretty messed up. But then again, Laura's whole story is pretty messed up, so there's that. Even as a little kid, she was trained to become an unstoppable killer, and even when she found her way to freedom and the X-Men, as well as Wolverine, her genetic father, who she was a female clone of, she wasn't even safe from a world of killing. She was such a good killer that Cyclops couldn't resist recruiting her to the X-Force, the mutant team that was sent in for less savory and more secretive Black Ops missions. Number 6. Elixir. Josh Foley's powers first manifested when he was just a teenager, like most mutants. Right away, they were pretty powerful, allowing him to heal people who had life-threatening injuries on the verge of death. He was originally a part of the anti-mutant group known as the Reavers, who kicked him out after learning that he was a mutant, severely beating him when he wouldn't accept their rejection. He just wanted to hate mutants still, but no, you can't, because you are one. Sorry. His parents also disowned him, and with nowhere to go, he was forced to join the Xavier Institute, despite not initially being interested in joining his fellow mutants. Elixir's powers were shown to be so powerful, even from a young age, that he could even heal powers that had been lost, giving Rain, who he had a crush on at the time, her powers back after she lost them when he kissed her. And to people who were like, but healers, are they that great? Because what if they get hurt? He can even heal himself, so yeah. Elixir's pretty cool. Number 5. Kitty Pryde. It's really hard when we are talking about Kitty because I personally just think her mutant powers as they stand are so overpowered. Just in my opinion. We also have to consider that Kitty Pryde kinda got fast-tracked during her time on the X-Men team. When Kitty joined the X-Men, she was basically a teenager and she was already pretty powerful. In fact, she could walk on air back in the original X-Men days. And Kitty also didn't have any trials on other young X-Men teams. She was kind of just put on the X-Men right out of the gate. So that is pretty crazy. Straight out of the gate, she was working with the pros. Of course, over time, she has had some of her weaknesses tweaked and even removed, but in exchange for some of her other secondary abilities kind of being lost. Teenage Kitty also went on tons of adventures that were just always seemingly adding and building on her skill set list. And even now as an adult, Kitty, or Kate as she currently prefers to be called, is still one of the most powerful and often, in my opinion, underrated mutants that we have on the X-Men roster today. Number 4. Magic. Magic is insanely powerful, even as a teenager, simply because she spent so long training with the powerful magic user turned demon who kidnapped her years ago, Belasco. Belasco wanted to harness Illyana's powers for himself, seeing her great potential. She eventually became so powerful that she defeated Belasco in his own dimension of Limbo. When she returned to her own dimension, escaping, she was no longer a little girl, though barely any time had passed on Earth while she was gone. It had only been seconds for her fellow mutants since she left, but for Magic it had been years, and she returned as a super powerful teenager with a strong connection to Limbo. While in Limbo, actually, Magic is basically a god, as being in Limbo puts her closer to her power source and effectively makes her almost undefeatable while there. Number 3. Jean Grey. Even when we see any teen versions of Jean, they are known for usually being very, very powerful. While we might now know Jean as an adult woman who is immensely powerful when she needs to be, or when the plot requires her to go into Phoenix mode and kind of act as a deus ex machina, we also have met younger versions of her thanks to various time traveling shenanigans. Even as a teenager and a child, Jean is often portrayed as being exceedingly powerful. In fact, when she originally met Xavier, her telepathic powers were so great that he was forced to put up mental blocks to protect her from them until she was better equipped to handle such an elevated level of power. And after a few adventures with the X-Men, she did get those blocks removed. She was ready. She was ready for the power. Number 2. Hope Summers. Even as a baby, Hope was super powerful. Hope's just blowing everybody else out of the water. She's like, I've been powerful since I was a little baby and I didn't even know what was going on. She was like, object permeance, what's that? But also, I have immense power. As a teenager, Hope was destined to be the new host of the Phoenix Force, but was prevented from connecting with the Phoenix. However, she was still instrumental in the Avengers vs. X-Men story when she helped Scarlet Witch to erase the Phoenix Force from existence near the end of that story. Even though that doesn't really make much sense now, given that apparently Scarlet Witch isn't a mutant and Hope's powers are to kind of amplify or adopt the powers of other mutants in her area, so that doesn't really make sense now, but anyways. Like Rogue, she can take on other mutants' power sets and even take on multiple at a time. The difference being she doesn't need physical contact to do so, and it does not drain the powers of life energy or life energy of the mutants whom she is emulating. As a baby, she was powerful enough to heal Rogue with one touch, who at the time was dying and comatose. You also basically know you're powerful when you're a mutant when you get your powers earlier than your teen years. That just means you're like the most powerful. Number 1. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I mean, I can't have a list with a name like Teenage and Mutant in the title and not mention the TMNT. Even though I know everyone's probably like, but Amanda, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are not more powerful than Hope Summers. What are you talking about? But this is my list and I want them to be number 1. So that's how it goes. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are definitely some of the most powerful pizza-loving Teenage Mutant Turtles out there. They might not be as powerful in terms of taking other people's powers or becoming a host of the Phoenix Force, but I also bet if they were able to become the host of Marvel's Phoenix Force, were they in the same reality, they would potentially even give Jean and Hope a run for their money. The other thing that makes the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles so powerful is that there isn't just one of them, there's a whole team of them. And working together, there is almost no force of evil that they cannot stop.
Starting us off in at number 10, Cassandra Nova. Cassandra Nova is a psionic parasitic life form that was born without a body on the astral plane. She's technically a race called a Mumundrai. Having become telepathically entangled with Charles Xavier, she copied his DNA and inherited some of his powers, adding to the already impressive skill set that this life form boasted. Okay, so context time. Nova copied Xavier's DNA to make herself a body, and then shared his mother's womb with him. Once she had fully formed hands and eyes in the womb, she tried to strangle Xavier to death with his own umbilical cord. That's metal. But Xavier released a psychic blast, which then caused his mother to have a miscarriage, and Cassandra ended up being a stillborn, although she managed to survive as cellular matter until she was able to grow a body for herself over time. So what is she capable of? Well, some terrifying stuff, that's what. She has telepathic and telekinetic powers, can duplicate DNA, has spontaneous cell regeneration, can shapeshift, can control cosmic fire, is immune to magic, and has premonitions. She can also control minds, gather souls, and dematerialize. In at number 9, Mr. Sinister. Created in 1986, but not fully seen on the panels until almost a year later in Uncanny X-Men issue 221, Mr. Sinister is Nathaniel Essex, a biologist who is obsessed with evolution and Darwinism. He is a genetically altered human who has become a mutant via his own genetic manipulation. He is telepathic, telekinetic, and through experimentation with genetic material from a mutant called Courier, he has gained complete control of his body at the cellular level, meaning he can shapeshift, regenerate, and be virtually immune to most injuries. He also has a prolonged lifespan. In addition to that, he is a complete genius when it comes to biology, genetics, cloning, physics, and engineering. In at number 8, Vulcan. Vulcan is a Summers boy. The brother of Cyclops and Havoc, Vulcan, aka Gabriel Summers, first appeared in X-Men Deadly Genesis issue 1 and had a much more tragic alien upbringing compared to his siblings. His infant body was aged to adolescence through a Shi'ar incubation accelerator. So yeah, definitely not a normal childhood. An Omega level mutant, Vulcan is capable of vast energy absorption, manipulation, transformation, and projection. He can fly. He can project force fields and manipulate said projections. He can regenerate to an extent and provide life support, and he can replicate others' superpowers to an extent. Plus, he's psionically resistant. Not too shabby.
At number 7, we've got Forget-Me-Not. Forget-Me-Not might also be a case of people judging a book by its cover because he doesn't really look too menacing, if we're being honest. But to be fair, his powers do also sound pretty lame at face value, so it could be that. Basically, this mutant can't be remembered by anyone he meets once he's out of sight. And as sad as this must be for him in his personal life, Forget-Me-Not can use this power to his advantage in a huge way in the right circumstances. In one case, he's even able to dupe all of X-Force when the team has to form an elaborate plan just to track him down. They're only able to finally catch him by having Dr. Nemesis record himself explaining to the team the existence of Forget-Me-Not as they search for him, and they keep watching it over and over again on their coffee breaks. And the only caveat to this whole situation is that the maintenance bots, along with, I'm assuming, any computer automated system, can remember Forget-Me-Not, which sort of weakens the potential for his powers in a way. So although he's more powerful than you might think, he's still got some vulnerabilities, but heck, everyone does, right? Forget-Me-Not.
Number 6, Dust. Created by Grant Morrison and Ethan Van Sciver for 2002's new X-Men number 133, Soraya Kadir is a young Muslim mutant who's enrolled in the Xavier Institute for Higher Learning. Now, she has largely been just a background character in the stories she shows up in, but Dust has been present for some of the largest events in recent X-Men history. Soraya was even one of the mutants who kept their powers after M-Day. Soraya is usually a pretty shy and quiet girl, but don't let that fool you. Her powers are no joke. Dust is able to transform into a cloud of sand, or dust, and even act as a violent sandstorm, literally stripping the flesh from her opponents. When she couldn't properly control her powers yet, Dust even unintentionally flayed 2 men alive after unleashing her power in an act of self-defense. Dust has also been shown to use her power internally, meaning like inside another person, entering her enemy's lungs and eroding them from the inside out, which is just a lovely thought. But wait! There's more. It also appears that Dust is immune to magic and telepathy based attacks in her sand form. The only problem is that if you pull out a hose or like a super soaker or something, she's pretty much done, as she's extremely vulnerable to water. She's a powerful mutant, but sorely underutilized.
At number 5, we have Marrow. I've covered this mutant in almost every one of my lists for the last few weeks now, and for good reason. She is just such an underappreciated mutant considering how versatile and honestly cool her powers are. And if you are a Marrow diehard fan, you know that she's had some difficulties with her powers, which might explain part of the reason why people tend to write her off. Initially, Marrow is unable to control the growth of her bones, which leaves her with some pretty painful and frankly terrifying looking struggles. But these days, she's honed her powers and has become quite impressive as a result. Her extreme bone growth allows her to eject super durable spikes from her skin, and then she can use them as weapons. She is adept at hand-to-hand combat, so this, paired with her ability to literally grow her own weapons and then heal up without issue, makes her pretty unstoppable.
Number 4. Jubilee. Jubilee's energy plasmoids might actually be one of the most potent of the X-Men's arsenal. The plasmoids aren't fireworks, even though they look a hell of a lot like them. They're actually closer to superheated plasma. She can create a bolt of bright light, but she can also push out enough power to bend steel or destroy a tree. And with precision can even detonate microbursts inside someone's brain. So that's the amount of range we're talking about here. But that ain't all. It goes even beyond that. As Jubilee's Generation X instructor, Emma Frost, once speculated, if wielded properly, Jubilee could detonate objects on a subatomic level, meaning this unassuming mall rat can cause explosions of atomic proportions. She's a highly underrated character in the comics and gained a lot of popularity in the 90s thanks to the X-Men TV show. And while she's gone in and out of having powers, she still remains one of the cooler characters in the X-Men's lineup.
At number 3 is Morph. Morph might sometimes be underestimated because of his funny disposition and his somewhat harmless look. With one of the best personalities out of all the mutants in my opinion, Kevin Sidney uses humor to work through his internal issues after his mother's death. But externally speaking, he deals with his other issues using his totally underrated power set. Morph is a master shapeshifter, capable of changing his body and his voice to mimic those of others. Not to mention, he's also able to fly at speeds of 40 miles per hour and has a healing factor due to his ability to manipulate the makeup of his molecules. But what's coolest about his powers is that if he chooses to grow more muscles, his strength will actually increase along with his appearance, and even if he can't get his strength up to match his opponent, his defensive stats are insane due to his ability to absorb the impact of any physical projectiles by simply allowing them to pass through him.
Number 2. Gambit. Gambit has the really cool mutant ability of molecular acceleration, allowing him to convert the potential energy of a non-living object through touch and kinetically excite the molecules to the point that they explode. Usually when a mutant has an ability that manipulates molecules, they have a pretty vast array of powers. But for Gambit, he mainly uses his abilities as attacks, charging up his signature playing cards and bow staff. But in an alternate universe, there is a future variation of Gambit known as New Sun, who is what Gambit would be if he reached the full potential of his power. He can manipulate kinetic energy down to a molecular level, meaning New Sun can charge objects and living beings without being in contact with them. He can stop objects that are in motion and make still objects begin moving. He can turn into a wave of energy, letting him travel through space and other dimensions, and he was even able to defeat the Dark Phoenix in his own universe by himself. We do see 616 Gambit use a lot of the same abilities as New Sun in a fight between the two in Gambit's 1999 solo series, but just knowing the potential this awesome Cajun sensation can reach, ooh, it's spicy.
At number 1 is Chamber. Chamber is another underrated mutant with a power set that isn't quite appreciated the way it should be. It may have something to do with the trauma that Jonathan Starsmore goes through to acquire his powers, and further how that experience hinders him from achieving certain goals that other more accomplished mutants are able to. Basically, Chamber has what's described as a furnace of psionic energy stored in his chest, and when his powers are first discovered, this energy explodes out of him, destroying the lower half of his mouth and blowing a hole in his chest cavity, forcing him into intensive surgery to reconstruct the lost body parts. Eventually, he hones his powers to a point where he can aim psionic blasts on command, which is kind of like Cyclops, except in this case it's coming out of a hole in his chest. But what's more is that Chamber later learns that he's in fact a descendant of Apocalypse, and he is eventually properly reconstructed by Clan Akaba in the appearance of Apocalypse. Although this leads him into a depression, Chamber then gets a huge power boost from this modification and changes his name to Decibel before joining the New Warriors.
Coming in at number 10 is Sync. Sync has the mutant ability of power mimicry, meaning, like Rogue, Sync can copy the powers of other mutants. Unlike Rogue, Sync has the benefit of not doing harm to whoever he is borrowing powers from, and he can also do it without physical touch. Recently though, after being resurrected, Sync got a bit of a power boost, and he may even become a new Omega level mutant. In the story, Sync not only uses his normal mutant powers to replicate the abilities of the mutants Sunfire and Cyclops while they were both nearby, but is also able to tap into Jean Grey's telekinetic abilities while she is literally all the way chillin' on Mars. Sync's growth in power post-resurrection was first noticed back in 2021's X-Men number 18, with Sync documenting that he was now able to sync not just with mutants, but other superhumans as well, which is quite the boost, and I think it just keeps going up and up and up. In the House of M alternate reality, Sync even got to the point of permanently retaining others' powers, which would be an incredible significant power boost as well. As a main member of the X-Men though, it's kinda hard to be surprised he's getting power boosts, so.
At number 9 is Eye-Boy. Eye-Boy is usually undervalued because he looks really silly, and I get it. He does look like if the drummer for Kings of Leon had 57 eyes, but you should never judge a book by its cover because although Eye-Boy doesn't look very menacing and seems rather confused most of the time, he's actually got a pretty good power set. He's got the ability to see just about anything, no matter how small and no matter how far. But on top of his microscopic and telescopic vision, he can also see basically every light wave there is, including X-ray, infrared, and thermal, among many others, including the magical plane as well. He also has night vision and even chemical detection. That's right, he can see pheromone secretions from people, giving him a tracking ability as well. Eye-Boy is just one of those sad cases where he's just too unsettling looking to really garner much respect for who he really is and what he's truly capable of.
Number 8, Domino. Nina Thurman is a mutant weapons expert and mercenary. Under the name Domino, she was introduced in the early 90s as a member of X-Force. Domino is a survivor of a bunch of unethical scientists who were trying to create the perfect weapon. Tale as old as time, really. But this means Domino has all the talents and skills you would expect of an expert mercenary or secret agent. But we're here to talk about powers, and Domino's are unique to say the least. Domino has probability manipulation powers, meaning she is almost always lucky. She exudes at all times a subconsciously activated field that alters the probability of occurrences in her line of sight in her favor. This means that whenever she is stressed, excited, or focused on something, things will go improbably well for her, and quite poorly for her opponents. Now there is a caveat to this. She needs to actively be trying to help herself for her power to work. So like, if debris is falling from the sky and was about to hit her on the head, she would still be hurt if she just stood still. But if she tried to avoid that debris, she would move perfectly to avoid each and every piece about to hit her. Now the full potential of Domino's abilities hasn't actually been fully realized yet, and Marvel has a knack for updating powers whenever they want. But with an ability to be lucky, there's only a finite amount of things you can't do.
And at number 7, Monarch. Not to be confused with the Monarch of DC fame, this Monarch is James Braddock Jr., brother to Captain Britain Brian Braddock and Betsy Braddock. An Omega-level mutant, Braddock has quantum reality manipulation powers. Now this means he sees the world as invisible string constructs, and he can pull on those strings to transform reality. He is also experienced in sorcery and has a superhuman stamina. Now unlike his siblings, he shifted into a life of crime early on, and eventually had to be put into a coma by his sister, while she was Psylocke, in order to stop his reign of terror with his reality warping powers. In at number 6, we have Exodus. Exodus, aka Benet du Paris, first hit Marvel's panels in 1993's X-Factor issue 92. Capable of telepathy, telekinesis, teleportation, superhuman physical attributes, and has a regenerative healing factor, oh, and obviously he's immortal, this Omega-level mutant has kicked some major X-Men butt in the past. His telepathic abilities surpass those of Charles Xavier, Emma Frost, X-Men, and Jean Grey. He's also a psionic vampire and can steal psionic energy from those around him if he's weakened. Plus, he can handle a whole lot, taking not only the X-Men, but also the Avengers on at the same time. Moving on to our number 5 spot, we have Magneto. This one's kind of an obvious one, isn't it? An Omega-level mutant and the most iconic character to appear on this list, Magneto is one of the most beloved villains of all time as far as comics are concerned. He is a villain with a point, a Holocaust survivor who uses extreme methods and a cynical philosophy in order to protect mutants from suffering a similar fate of persecution at the hands of a world that fears them. His ideology is in direct competition with that of Xavier's, and he rejects the idea of a peaceful human and mutant coexistence. He also believes that mutants are the evolutionary superior race. Aside from his intellect and his ideologies, Magneto is dangerous for his magnetism manipulation abilities. Like we said, he is an Omega-level mutant, meaning there is no actual cap to his powers or capabilities that we know of. Speaking of Omega-level mutants, let's go to our next number. In at 4, Legion. Really, Legion isn't a villain, but he's a character who has put a lot at jeopardy as far as mutant kind is concerned. So, Legion is the son of Charles Xavier and Gabrielle Haller, and is an Omega-level mutant with a vast amount of abilities that include reality warping, shape-shifting, matter manipulation and transmutation, energy manipulation, telepathy, telekinesis, teleportation, and time travel. Legion, aka David Haller, also has hundreds and hundreds of split personalities. He's way more of an anti-hero these days, but initially the character caused a whole lot of trouble for the X-Men when he tried to go back in time to kill Magneto as a means of helping his father achieve his dream of human-mutant coexistence. And in doing so, he accidentally created the Age of Apocalypse timeline. Yeah. In at number 3, Onslaught. Onslaught is a psionic amalgamation of two exceptionally powerful mutants. We're talking Charles Xavier and Magneto. Okay, story time. In 1996, in X-Men Volume 2, Issue 53, Onslaught was created as the result of Charles Xavier putting Magneto into a coma. Now, prior to this, Magneto had used his powers to rip the adamantium off of Wolverine's skeleton. It was pretty brutal, and caused Xavier to be slightly unhinged. He lost it and used his telepathic powers to render Magneto catatonic, shutting down his mind. Now, during this psionic contact, all of Magneto's anger, grief, and desire for vengeance entered Xavier's consciousness, and then mingled with all of Xavier's negative suppressed feelings that he had buried deep down. The result was a sentient psionic entity called Onslaught, who was too powerful for just the X-Men to take on. The Avengers and the Fantastic Four had to get involved too to stop him. He is a villain with psychic omnipotence, who is superior in physical and mental power. He possesses the combined abilities of Professor X, Magneto, Franklin Richards, and Nate Gray, and overall, his powers exceed that of an Omega-level mutant. In at number 2, Proteus. Proteus is our last Omega-level mutant on this list. The son of Moira McTaggart, Proteus is Kevin McTaggart, a mutant with reality warping and possession powers who lived most of his life in seclusion at his mother's Muir Island research facility. Now, this is because he exists in a state of pure psionic energy and can take possession of human bodies, with most of the bodies burning out within a few days or hours. His vast psionic abilities allow him to fully dominate said individual he possesses, and he has access to the individual's memories during this time. Although he cannot do this with those who have metal in their bodies. It's actually his weakness, and seems to disperse his consciousness if he tries to enter them. So, the likes of Wolverine can withstand him. Now, his reality manipulation abilities allow him to bend the laws of physics and transmute matter. He can do this with absolute ease, and that is terrifying. These days, like several other mutants on our list, Proteus is one of the good guys, aligned with the mutants of Krakoa, and is actually part of a group called the Five. It consists of 5 mutants who use their abilities to revive dead mutants. And last but not least, in our number 1 spot, Apocalypse. Apocalypse can pretty much do anything. The character who first fully appeared in X-Factor issue 6 back in 1986 believes in the survival of the fittest. If you are weak, you are destroyed. Apocalypse is all about trying to forward evolution, and he believes he's right in his actions too. That's a deadly mentality. And what about his powers? Well, they all stem from his self-molecular control. This means that he has molecular, matter, energy, and universal manipulation abilities. He's omnipotent, he's omnipresent, and he is immortal, invulnerable, has superhuman strength, stamina, speed, durability, agility, reflexes, resilience, dexterity, intelligence, and senses. He's got a genius level intellect, he can fly, he is a shapeshifter, he can astral project, he's telekinetic, telepathic, a technopath, precognitive, can augment the powers of other mutants, can transfer consciousness to another being, has the ability to absorb, manipulate, or steal the powers of other mutants and cosmic beings, and he has the ability to make other mutants' powers stronger. So all in all, there's a reason why he's the most feared villain of the X-Men. Although these days, post House of X, he's on the good guy's side now, and goes by a symbol for a name that no one can pronounce.
Number 10, Blackheath. Blackheath is Samuel Smithers. Yep, in the reality of 1610, Plant Man is instead a mutant. His powers are similar to that of Poison Ivy, allowing him to control plant life. Blackheath was one of the mutants who was kept in William Stryker's camps. While there, he ended up meeting and befriending Storm, and would be one of the few mutants left when Utopia came about. Number 9. Mach 2. Mach 2 is Nomi Bloom. She is kind of like the second coming of Magneto, but not as much of a villain. Or at least, she comes around in the end. And not inherently as powerful as Magneto was. She can basically affect and control magnetic fields. Later on, she would see a power boost, which would enable her to have more control over objects containing metal. Mach 2 is also known for being a rival to Kitty in terms of her leadership over the surviving mutants of Utopia. People are going to be like, what is Utopia? And I'm going to be like, don't worry. We're getting to that much later, but it's coming. It's slowly you'll get little bits of information. Number 8. Zorn. In the reality of Earth 1610, Zorn is actually Zorn, but is not the only version of Zorn. Wow, that sounded confusing. What I mean to say is that Zorn is his own person, Kuan Yin, but has a sibling who is also named Zorn, but with a Z. They were each given their powers as part of the Southeast Asian Republic's Super Soldier program. Zorn with an X is the one who you typically see clad in the color white. He is an amazingly powerful telepath and telekinetic. While both characters may have been introduced later and have been somewhat short-lived, they are both presented as being pretty powerful during their time in the comics. Number 7. Dust. Dust is Soraya Kadir. She was enslaved as a child but freed by the X-Men. Originally, she did not want to reveal herself to the mutants and hid herself by turning into scattered sand. When Jean Grey sensed her presence and encouraged Soraya to reveal and introduce herself, she did so by referring to herself as Turab, which is Arabic for dust. She can turn herself into dust and manipulate her body to move at high speeds, causing her to become a deadly sandstorm to her enemies. As sand particles, she can also enter the bodies of other people, causing internal damage. Dust is also resistant to magic and telepathic manipulation or detection while in her sand form. Dust is another person that I feel like we never see enough of in the comics. Someone bring back Dust. Number 6. Layla Miller. Layla's abilities, skills, and powers tend to be pretty specific, which means that she might not inherently seem powerful to readers. Layla has been shown to be able to reanimate beings, heal wounds, and appears to be immune to reality warping. She also has a lot of knowledge about her own future life and the events surrounding it, as she spent time in the future and then returned and uploaded all she had learned into her younger self when she returned to that Layla's present, which I guess was technically her past. Her vast knowledge often comes in handy and is what helped the mutants to figure out who was really after the baby mutant Messiah during the events of Messiah Complex. Her own knowledge has also technically helped her in gaining the knowledge that she has needed to have in order to gain it, if that makes any sense. Timey-wimey stuff. Number 5. Maxime and Manon. Maxime and Manon are twin siblings born to mutant parents. Their powers as such manifested when they were younger than most. They haven't been in a ton of comics, most about probably 11 issues, but they have been shown to be pretty deadly and powerful even as children, both in Extermination and recently in the newest run of New Mutants. Maxime can influence others' emotions, while Manon can alter someone's memories, or recall their memories past. When combined, their powers actually allow them to manipulate the minds of others to the point that they can easily control them, shaping their victims into whatever they like them to be and making them do whatever they want. In issues 3 and 4 of New Mutants, both Maxime and Manon were captured along with Armor, Glob, Angel Salvador, Beak, and the couple's children, but managed to escape. Manon and Maxime helped to free the rest of the group by distracting their captives, manipulating one of them into killing the other. Number 4. Mirage. You might not recognize her mutant name, but if you've seen the New Mutants film, or you are familiar with the New Mutants at all, Mirage will be someone that you maybe know. Mirage is actually Daniel Moonstar. Standard X-Men fans may be less familiar with Dani, but she has also been one of the X-Men, and she is known for her affiliation with the New Mutants crew and all the female defenders who are also known as Valkyraur. Dani herself became a Valkyrie when the New Mutants were kidnapped by Amora the Enchantress and taken to Asgard, so she doesn't just have her mutant power of illusion creation and telepathy, which originally she could only use to recreate the fear of others, but she also has some of the powers granted to Valkyries. Oh, and she can make cool psionic arrows too. Number 3. Strong Guy. Strong Guy has similar powers to another mutant we talked about on part 1 of this list. His abilities allow him to use kinetic energy to augment his strength, increasing it. However, he cannot hold the energy for long as it could severely harm him, distort his physical form, or even kill him. Still, even with the rule that he must expel any absorbed energy within less than 2 minutes of absorption, he is pretty powerful, using his powers to safely lift up to around 100 tons. Strong Guy's real name is Guido Carosella, and he first appeared in the original New Mutant series in issue 29. Number 2. A mutant with no name. In the alternate reality belonging to the Ultimate Universe of 1610, we got a story that introduced us to a mutant who had no name. This mutant's powers were so devastating that we were not permitted the time to get to know him. His powers had only just manifested, but they were so deadly that they caused the deaths of over 200 people in his hometown, including his parents and his girlfriend at high school, with the deaths being almost instantaneous. But there was no snapping involved. It wasn't a Thanos thing. No Infinity Gauntlets. His mutant power was basically to kill everything around him, radiating toxins and poisons that basically vaporize organic tissue. He was so dangerous, powerful, and deadly that Wolverine was sent to eliminate him, as the young mutant's existence posed too much of a threat to the mutant image, as well as both humans and mutants alike, just in general. Number 1. Matthew Malloy. Matthew Malloy is one of the strongest, most random mutants who now belongs to the alternate timeline of Earth 14923, because he was just too powerful to basically continue to exist. Like many of the most epic mutants, he had reality warping powers and was additionally considered Omega level in terms of his ability. Matthew's powers unfortunately were often tied to his emotions, which proved problematic and often resulted in massively destructive outbursts of energy. In the end, Tempest traveled back in time and, with help from Professor X of the past, was able to prevent Matthew's parents from ever meeting, meaning that he was never born. Number 10. Karma. Karma is a mutant with very specific powers, so it should surprise no one that she is part of the New Mutants team. I actually love the New Mutants for this reason. A lot of their members tend to be forgotten and yet are super powerful when their abilities are properly utilized. Xian Koiman possesses limited telepathic abilities, but can have a strong sense of sort of psychic projection. Karma can emit a wave of energy that disables her target's consciousness, allowing her to take over control of their body, experiencing what they experience as though she were actually in their body, sensing what they taste, hear, smell, see, and feel. Those she controls will awaken unaware, afterwards experiencing this possession as if they had just been in a dream and basically had been sleepwalking. She can also do this on a mass scale, possessing multiple people, though she must overcome many challenges in order to fluidly control multiple people at once. Number 9. Hijack. Hijack is David Bond, a technopath mutant who can use his abilities to telepathically control any vehicle. He has used his powers to control massive sentinels and even control an entire helicarrier. The rule seems to be if you can steer it, fly it, or drive it, Hijack can control it, although it has been implied that the vehicle in question likely needs to have some kind of mechanical makeup, so sailboats are probably not something Bond could manipulate, unless you had a sailboat that also had an engine, which I think is a thing now. I don't think all sailboats are just sails. Still, in a world where we are surrounded by tech and tons of engine-powered vehicles, David Bond's abilities are pretty powerful. Alas, he has only appeared in less than 50 issues of comics. Someone tell me, where is David Bond now? Where is he on Krakoa? Is he there? I want to see him. Number 8. Summoner. Summoner is a new mutant whose name also signifies the type of mutant that they are. They are the child of Apocalypse's first horsemen of war. Arakko, the landmass itself, was drawn to Krakoa and Krakoa to it. The two fused together to increase the size of the land overall, although Arakko is not yet considered safe and is basically known as kind of the monster territory part of Krakoa. I mean, technically it still isn't Krakoa, but they're attached now, so they are each other. Summoner's abilities allow them to summon the dark beasts of Arakko. We don't know too much about them yet because they've only been in a few issues, but what we do know is that they can withstand the blast of one of Cable's thermal grenades, his last one in fact, without taking virtually any damage. So overall, they seem like they're going to be pretty crazy and powerful. X of Swords, I'm assuming we're going to see more about them. Number 7. Egg. Fabio Medina might not seem like a powerful mutant based on his ability, but since his rise to the supremely important mutant group known as the Five on Krakoa, he can be considered one of the most important and powerful mutants around. When he combines his powers with that of the Five, he has control over life and death. Originally, the bouncy gold balls that he shot forth from his chest were believed to be nothing special, but it was later revealed that these balls were actually infertile eggs, which could be used in the process of resurrecting new mutants. Number 6. Tempest. Eva Bell is another member of the Five. She has actually appeared in less issues than Egg, if you can believe it, despite the fact that she has a pretty neat power set, and it's been neat since the beginning, which allows her to time travel. Tempest, as she used to be known, was able to control the passage of time in a specific pocket of space. She could also slow time in a current space that she also inhabited, either slowing time around her or creating time bubbles to manipulate time in that bubble, where she could speed it up or slow it down. The only challenge for her has been losing control of her powers, which can cause them to behave unpredictably. Still, controlling time is a pretty impressive and powerful ability to have. Number 5. Empath. Manuel de la Rocha made his first appearance in the original New Mutant series, where he was part of Emma Frost's team known as the Hellions. He's recently reappeared in the newest Hellion series from 2020 and proves just how powerful, but also how sadistic he can be. Empath's power is, you guessed it, empathy, and he can use this power to not only sense others' emotions, but also to control them, in effect manipulating others into doing whatever he wishes them to do. His influence can be subtle, such that someone might not even realize they're being manipulated by him, or it can be more forceful, turning his victims into complete husks of their former selves and bending them fully to his will. Number 4. Vulcan. Vulcan is one of the most powerful mutants around, being an Omega level mutant, skilled in energy manipulation and absorption. Yet he is somehow the lesser known of all the Summers, despite his insane power levels. He has also demonstrated the ability to absorb his opponent's powers as well, and use them for himself on the rare occasion. Vulcan is the youngest Summers brother, also known as Gabe Summers, and we only learned of his existence in 2006 when he first appeared in the comic X-Men Deadly Genesis issue number 1, and yet he is considered the most powerful of these three. Number 3. Orphan Maker and Nanny. Orphan Maker still remains a relatively mysterious character, though is also one who still proves to be a force to be reckoned with in combat. Orphan Maker is also known as Peter and was part of a plot of Mr. Sinister's originally. However, when Mr. Sinister decided that Peter could not be controlled, he decided to eliminate him. Nanny, an insane cyborg, however, saved him, believing it was her responsibility to look after orphan mutant children and protect them. Although I will say she's got a weird way of going about it. While insane, Nanny was also once a scientist and remains quite intelligent. She actually outfitted Orphan Maker with weapons and a powerful suit to help her in her task. While it's still unclear as to what Orphan Maker's true mutant powers are, and while he seems to still have the mind of a child, probably due to Nanny's manipulation, his suit and weapons make him a formidable foe in combat, and he often uses pixie dust in battle to help Nanny influence and control the minds of their opponents, as she herself is a telepath, but a weak one, so she needs a little bit of help. Needs a little bit of pixie dust. Even during a fight with Cyclops, Scott's optic blasts were unable to harm Orphan Maker while he was in his armor, with Scott's blast simply reflecting off the armor, causing more harm than help, really. Number 2. Trinary. Considering the modern age we live in, Trinary is a pretty powerful mutant. Her abilities allow her to control all tech that is within her line of sight. She has used these powers to move massive sums of money digitally and to manipulate and control Sentinel tech. Currently on Krakoa, Trinary is one of the few technopathic mutants trusted with the important project known as Sleeping Giant, wherein mutants monitor for upcoming advancement in Sentinel technology, such as Nimrods or the creation of a mother mold, so that they can ideally put a stop to its development. Project Sleeping Giant were instrumental in helping the X-Men to destroy a mother mold that Orchis was creating before it went online. Number 1. Bailey Hoskins. Now you might think I'm joking here if you happen to know the obscure Bailey Hoskins, but I'm really not. Bailey appeared in his own miniseries titled X-Men, Worst X-Man Ever. He was known for being the worst X-Man ever because his ability only allowed him to do one thing: explode. But he didn't have any regeneration powers, so he basically was a mutant who could never use his powers, otherwise he'd kill himself. It's kind of a one-hit wonder. So How is that powerful? Well, it's also implied in the series that when he does choose to sacrifice himself and blow up the villain of the story, that he makes it possible for Earth-616 to come into existence. So without him, we wouldn't have the main Marvel continuity that we know and love today, potentially. If saving the entire continuity from becoming a dystopian future isn't powerful, then I don't know what is. Number 10, Prodigy. I feel like a lot of people maybe forgot about Prodigy, as he's been MIA for some time in the comics and was depowered during the events of M-Day. But with the magic of Krakoa and Dawn of X, he was able to return to us, being resurrected and also regaining his powers. 1. Prodigy happens to be a super genius, but this is also because he's a telepath with the ability to basically mimic anyone's skill set and share their knowledge while nearby. This has also been shown in the past to extend to fighting precognition, where he can basically use his abilities to read a person and predict their next move of attack in a battle, which is pretty sweet. He often also builds his own advanced tech, and even when depowered is known to possess a great level of intellect, making him a challenging adversary whether or not he has his mutant abilities. Even as a depowered mutant, you might not want to mess with him. Number 9, Lady Mastermind. Lady Mastermind, aka Reagan Wingard, recently popped back up in the giant-sized Nightcrawler comics and was welcomed into the mutant nation of Krakoa. Some, however, may not know or appreciate her mutant history and background. Just who is Lady Mastermind? Well, she's the daughter of Jason Wingard, aka the original villain known as Mastermind. Her powers take after her father's, allowing her to create realistic illusions projected into her target's minds. While she also has an even lesser known suspected half-sister, Reagan's powers are often depicted as being the more powerful between the two, with it even being said that her abilities are even more stronger than her father's. Additionally, she is also fairly skilled in hand-to-hand combat, a skill set her father actually very much lacked. He was hilarious in a fight. He's like a rag doll. Sorry, Mastermind. Number 8, Gentle. Gentle is a mutant with the abilities of super strength. I know, very hilarious considering his name. He can grant himself immediate muscle mass that basically allows him to change size and increase his strength when needed. It is yet unknown just how strong Gentle can make himself, and he is also known for being someone who could potentially even take on the Hulk, although he is more of a pacifist, hence his name. Gentle's real name is Nezno Abidemi. I hope I'm saying that right. Nezno Abidemi. I'm sorry if I'm saying it wrong. It's a hard one to say. He was raised in Wakanda, but always felt like an outsider because his father was Russian. When his mutant abilities surfaced, it was actually Aurora Monroe Storm, who was queen at the time in Wakanda, who encouraged him to be sent to the Xavier Institute so he could learn how to better control his powers. His vibranium tattoos are also meant to help him to control those powers. Also, vibranium tattoos are super cool, but I think they're also super painful to get, so maybe don't get them. You can't, because it's not a real substance, but still. Number 7, Zorn. This is the sibling I was telling you about. Zorn with a Z or a Z is Shen Yin, the brother of Zorn with an X. His powers are much darker in nature. It's actually believed in the comics that Zorn and Zorn were sort of destined to bring a sense of balance to the world and mutant kind, symbolically sort of representing yin and yang, black and white. Zorn's powers are basically akin to a black hole. He emits a black hole energy and can use his powers to manipulate gravity. In the end, Zorn sacrifices himself when he realizes that he cannot win in the war against the children of tomorrow. In his death, he effectively becomes a black hole in retaliation. Number 6, Colossus. A strong mutant on Earth-616 and in 1610. Initially, Pyotr Rasputin did not possess super strength as part of his power set, but was given a drug called Banshee to enhance his strength, as well as a job working for the Russian mafia. Eventually, he ended up joining the X-Men, though he would leave the team on a few separate occasions. He'd managed to hold off Scarlet Witch, save a submarine that not even the Ultimates were capable of saving, and defeat Proteus, David Xavier, Xavier's son, who threatened the entire world with violence, traveling around and targeting international landmarks the world over. Differences between Colossus of Earth-1610 and that of Earth-616 is that here he isn't inherently strong, as I said before, in his steel form, but needs Banshee to give him that boost. And he's also gay. He even for a time dates fellow mutant Northstar. Number 5, Jimmy Hudson. Jimmy Hudson is the son of Wolverine. He also inherited his claws, superior senses, and regenerative healing factor. Like his dad, it's believed that his powers may actually be based in survival as opposed to just healing, with James being seen as adapting to survive injury or harsh environments as needed. Unlike Wolverine, Jimmy can choose to coat his claws in metal, as this is actually part of his power set, and it's believed that only his claws end up being coated. not the rest of his skeleton. Jimmy was a crucial member of the mutant resistance, which fought against Sentinel and militia attacks that threatened to wipe out the mutants. In the end, the mutants were victorious and were given a choice of going to live on their own piece of land in Utah or taking a cure for their mutation. Jimmy was one of the few mutants who decided to keep his powers. Number 4. Storm. Initially in the Ultimate Universe, Storm didn't have great control over her powers, and mostly got by stealing cars, but after the X-Men took her in, she learned how to control and even master her powers, allowing her to become one of the most fearsome and powerful mutants around. Ultimate Storm is so cool. Storm is so fast, she has been shown to be able to catch people who are falling in midair, dodge bullets, and even keep pace with a plane. Impressive considering planes on average travel at speeds over 540 miles per hour or over 870 kilometers per hour. That's fast. She's also likely not someone you'd want to tangle with, as even when she takes hits in battles, she tends to keep fighting or instinctively strike back. Using her lightning storm and weather control powers, she's also managed to defeat multiple opponents with one single attack, whether they be Sentinel opponents or human opponents, and in some cases, even killing them. I think at one point she kills like 11 people at once, and it's just like, okay. Don't mess with Storm. Got it. I mean, I already knew that before from her 616, but now I really know. Number 3, Jean Grey. In Ultimates, it almost seems there is nothing Jean can't do. Before she joined the X-Men, she was in a mental institution as the manifestation of her powers made her seem insane. However, Professor X would save Jean and recruit her on his X-Men team, with her being the second member. In the Ultimate Universe, we have seen Jean become possessed by what she thought was a cosmic entity referred to as the Phoenix God, and almost lose control and her sanity. The biggest problem with Jean is similar to that of her Earth 616 counterpart. Immense power threatens to basically break her mind, or at least take over her sense of sanity. In the comics, Jean is not only a skilled telepath and was even able to read Wolverine's mind, something Professor X believed wasn't even possible, but she also happens to, weirdly enough, be a skilled doctor and surgeon as well, although I'm pretty sure she doesn't have any medical license. Say what? Jean was even shown to be capable of connecting and tapping into the multiverse to reach out and see various versions of herself. Basically, she can do everything, because being a telepath is crazy powerful. Number 2, Magneto. Obviously, one of the most powerful mutants out there has to be Magneto, not just for the powers of magnetism that he wields, but also just for his influence. Magneto was the mastermind behind Ultimatum. I suppose I should use the term mastermind lightly there, as Ultimatum in general is not really seen very favorably in most fans' eyes. I admit it was controversial and caused a lot of perhaps needless death. In fact, I would say it was needless death. But you have to acknowledge just how much of a threat it painted Magneto out to be. While I'm not sure about Magneto basically committing genocide as a victim of one himself, you have to admit that this made him one of the most fearsome characters in all of the Ultimate Universe. And for Magneto, there is power in fear, even though oddly enough, it is usually fear that tends to power the hate that he often stands up against. Number 1, Kitty Pryde. One of the most powerful characters as a leader especially. She ends up becoming the ruler of the mutant tent nation that the mutants dub Utopia. This is a portion of land in Utah that the mutants who choose not to accept the cure are given. In fact, all those who refuse to take the cure are forced to live there. Kitty ends up fighting a war against Jean Grey in the Ultimate Universe as well, because Jean wants Kitty to join the mutant nation that she was put in charge of ruling after the death of Zorn with an X, Xian. But Kitty refuses to bring their people together. Kitty is such a good leader, she even steps down from her title as the leader of Utopia to help ease the target on her own people's backs because of her and Jean's conflict. Kitty and Utopia would end up winning that war, and Kitty would also play a crucial role in defeating Galactus as well. Also, I gotta say, that whole World War X thing, it was pretty weird. It was pretty weird, friends.